This ordinary mining workers' company was on the verge of shutting down because of heavy losses. But then he discovers a massive gold mine hidden deep in the forest. To reach it, however, he must face dangers he could never have imagined. The thrilling story begins with a man named Kenny, who worked for a gold search company that traveled to different places to locate gold mines, extract the gold, and sell it for high prices. Years earlier, Kenny's father had discovered one of the largest gold mines, and from that moment, mining became their family business. They always knew there were countless hidden mines across the land, and with proper research, they could uncover gold worth billions of dollars in today's market. Kenny's father was now very old, so Kenny was the one managing the business. One day, Kenny brought his girlfriend Kate to his office to give her a tour. She was fascinated by everything she saw. When she first heard that Kenny searched for gold mines, she thought there would be digging sites and workers everywhere, but instead she found a fully corporate office. Kenny explained that they didn't directly mine but first reached out to investors for research funding, and when they found gold mines, they shared profits generously. This way, both sides benefited, and the business had been running successfully so far. Kenny even proposed to Kate with a golden watch, worth a fortune in the market but just a small gesture for him. Kate was deeply impressed by the expensive gift. Soon after, Kenny's aging father appeared, giving him important advice. He warned that their business was standing on a fragile balance of profit and loss. While they were making money now, finding new gold mines would only get harder with time. If that happened, investors would stop funding, and profits would vanish. Kenny, however, confidently assured his father that they had already traced multiple gold mine locations with the help of experts and would uncover them soon. Seeing his son's determination, the father was happy. Years passed, and eventually Kenny's father died of illness. Kenny himself had grown old, and his worst fear came true. His gold mining company was running at a massive loss. The truth was, the earth simply didn't have as many gold mines as Kenny and his team claimed. Investors stopped supporting them. Though Kenny had married Kate, they were now surviving by running a small bar, while the company was nearly finished. Still, Kenny refused to give up and kept searching for new mines that could cover his losses. He pitched his ideas to many investors but faced constant rejections. After months of effort, one investor finally agreed to hear him out. Kenny quickly presented his plan and explained the location of a potential new mine. But the investors' representatives rejected the idea outright, offering no funding. Shattered by the rejection, Kenny realized his company might soon close forever. One wrong move could drag him into crushing debt. Desperate, he even reached out to his friends for help, but in his darkest time, no one came through. Even though Kenny had helped countless people during his prime, when he fell into this critical situation, everyone turned their backs on him. Frustrated, he drank heavily and passed out. The only good thing was that his wife, Kate, still stood by him. Anyone else would have abandoned him long ago. While asleep, Kenny began to envision something: vast blue forests stretching endlessly in every direction. It was a secret region of Indonesia, and in his vision, he saw a man named Max. Whether it was just imagination or some kind of sign wasn't clear, but when Kenny woke up, he knew one thing for certain. He had to go to Indonesia to meet Max. Max was an old scientist who specialized in mining and had previously discovered multiple silver and copper mines. He believed that deep inside an Indonesian forest lay the greatest treasure of gold ever known. Most dismissed it as a myth because no one had ever reached that place, but Kenny decided he had to meet Max in person. The next day, he told Kate he would be away for some days and asked her to take care of herself. His financial condition was so bad that he had to sell some of their gold belongings to cover his travel expenses. With the little money he gathered, he traveled straight to Max's hotel and finally met him. Kenny laid out his plan, saying he believed in the story of the great treasure and wanted them to work together to find it. He promised to cover all expenses through his company. Max was surprised. This was the first man who believed in his claims. He also knew that if they failed, Kenny's company would collapse completely. But Kenny was willing to take the risk, determined to find the treasure no matter how dangerous the journey became. At first, Max thought Kenny was crazy, but his confidence eventually convinced him. They quickly gathered supplies, boarded a boat, and set off into the dense forest. As they traveled, Max guided Kenny through hidden regions, explaining the secrets of the forest. Along the way, they saw local tribes living near the river, diving for gold in the water. These people suspected that gold existed here, but they lacked proper equipment to mine it effectively. Kenny already knew how expensive gold hunting was. Just maintaining machines and equipment cost a fortune, which was why his company was in losses. Soon, Max led Kenny to a breathtaking sight. Kenny was shocked. It was the exact vision he had seen in his dreams. Slowly, he began to believe this was where the greatest treasure awaited. Excited, he asked Max for details about how to start their research. Max explained that the rules of this place were different. Every team and every machine had to follow separate processes, and he estimated the entire operation could cost up to $1 million. Kenny didn't have that kind of money, but he and Max decided to partner, splitting the costs 50-50. Kenny even drafted an agreement, clearly stating that if they made a profit, they would share it equally, and if they faced a loss, they would also bear it equally. After much thought, Max finally agreed and signed the contract, keeping the small document with him as a reminder. The biggest challenge now was raising the required money. Kenny rushed back to his company and pitched the plan to investors. Some agreed, while others flatly refused. After relentless effort, Kenny finally managed to raise his half of the amount and immediately sent the funds to Max so he could hire workers and gather equipment. With everything arranged, the research began. Kenny joined Max on site, and together they launched extensive studies to find areas rich in gold. Their advanced equipment was an advantage, allowing them to test soil samples and analyze whether gold existed beneath the ground. If even traces of gold appeared, it would confirm the presence of a mine. Unfortunately, every report came back negative. None of the samples showed even a fraction of gold. With each failed test, morale plummeted. Kenny, who had invested his company's resources, stood to lose the most, yet he still clung to hope. If they found the treasure, all debts would be erased, and profits would soar, but only if results turned positive. Still, the outcomes remained the same. Max urged patience, saying good things take time, but neither of them knew the dangerous trials that lay ahead. Their search deep in the forest continued, but Kenny's health began to fail, making it hard for him to focus. Nearly a month passed with no success, not even a small chance of finding gold. Meanwhile, their funds were nearly gone. Workers weren't being paid properly, and one by one, they abandoned the project until only Kenny and Max were left. Despite being sick, Kenny told Max to trust him. They would find the mine no matter what. Max knew it was nearly impossible for just two men, but he stayed by Kenny's side, taking care of him. When Max admitted that all his money had run out, Kenny handed over his last remaining credit cards, telling him to use them for the research. He insisted they couldn't stop, because quitting would mean their entire lives were ruined. Max understood how important this search was to Kenny. Without it, his company would collapse completely. Taking the cards, Max went to the workers' village and pleaded for their help, promising great profit if they found gold. But the village chief showed him their reality. The people had almost no resources, and many children were sick. Parents couldn't leave their families to work without pay. Moved by their suffering, Max used Kenny's credit cards to buy clean water and medicines for the tribe. Grateful for the help, the villagers felt that someone truly cared for them. Inspired, they decided to join the search. The workers returned, this time working with even greater determination and speed. Kenny was still struggling with his illness, lying unconscious for 2 days before finally opening his eyes. The first thing he asked Max was, "Did we find the gold?" Max's face showed deep disappointment. He explained that countless reports and tests had been conducted, and every single one came back negative, showing no trace of gold. Hearing this, Kenny nearly gave up hope, realizing his company was doomed. But then Max revealed that a new report had just arrived, and this time, it showed a percentage of gold. Instantly, Kenny was filled with energy and excitement, convinced this was the first sign of a massive treasure nearby. Both men rejoiced, certain they were now on the right path. Word spread quickly, even appearing in newspapers, reporting that Kenny's company had found a potential gold-rich site. Recognition grew, and soon investors who had once turned their backs were suddenly eager to pour money into the company. The business, which had been on the brink of collapse, now had fresh momentum. Kenny even found himself in the position of choosing which investors he wanted. With the discovery of that small percentage of gold, everything changed. Huge amounts of money flowed into Kenny and Max's research, making them wealthy, and within months Kenny's company had risen to the top. Riding the wave of profit, Kenny moved into a luxury apartment in New York, basking in success. News articles praised their discovery, and the two became celebrities. The turning point came when the world's largest bank offered funding, but they demanded a partnership in the business. Kenny and Max stood firm. The project was only theirs. If the bank wanted to invest, it could be only for profit, not ownership. The bank agreed, but insisted that investors should see proof firsthand. Kenny and Max allowed it, and the next day several investors joined them in the forest. There, they extracted material from the water and uncovered a piece of gold, confirming that a real mine existed. Investor confidence skyrocketed, share prices soared, and the company gained immense trust. Celebrating the success, Kenny hosted a massive party, now at the peak of his career with more money than he could have imagined. But with wealth came arrogance and ego. At the party, though Kenny was with his wife Kate, his attention drifted to another woman named Rita. He spent much of the night talking closely with her, something Kate noticed with growing anger. A heated argument broke out between Kenny and Kate, with her warning that all these people were only around because of his profits and wealth, and if that ever disappeared, so would they. But Kenny, blinded by greed and ambition, refused to listen. Obsessed with moving forward at any cost, he turned his back on the wife who had stood by him in his darkest times and chose to be with Rita instead. And perhaps this was the beginning of Kenny's downfall. Here we are introduced to another businessman named Mark, who came to meet Kenny. Like Kenny, Mark also ran a gold exploration company, making him a direct competitor. Mark wanted the same fame and recognition that Kenny was receiving, but so far, he had made no significant discoveries. Kenny and Mark had always shared a bitter rivalry. The next day, Mark arrived with his team and presented an offer to Kenny's company through the largest bank. Mark's company would pay a huge sum of money in exchange for a share of whatever treasure Kenny's company discovered. On paper, the deal seemed beneficial, as Mark was offering millions, but because of their rivalry, Kenny rejected the offer outright, declaring that he would never share the treasure. Mark took note of this, and the hostility between them deepened. Even the bank urged Kenny to accept, but he refused again and again, unaware of Mark's strong government contacts. Determined to teach Kenny a lesson, Mark reached out to the Indonesian government, who in turn sent the military to occupy the forest where Mike and his team were conducting their research. The Indonesian army sealed off the entire area, banning any further exploration. When Kenny learned this, he panicked. If they couldn't continue the research, every investor would withdraw their money, creating a crisis. Later, he discovered that Mark was behind it all. When Kenny went to Mike to sort things out, Mike attacked him in anger. It was obvious, Kenny's ego had caused this. Had he not picked a fight with Mark, they would still control the site. The two clashed bitterly but eventually cooled down, realizing they needed to find a solution together. Mike explained that since the government had seized the area, reclaiming it would be nearly impossible. He recalled how he once explored with another friend who eventually left because of constant failures, leaving the research abandoned, until Kenny came along. Remembering how Kenny had supported him during those hard times, Mike decided they should stop blaming each other and work as a team again. Mike suggested a plan. They could try to win over Danny, the son of a powerful Indonesian businessman and politician. Danny was known for his wild, reckless lifestyle, addicted to drugs and money. If they could somehow persuade Danny to join their side, he could use his father's influence to return the mine to them. The idea seemed promising, so Kenny and Mike went to see him. Danny, despite being wealthy, was extremely greedy. Danny listened in silence, studying every word, every nervous glance that passed between the two men. It didn't take him long to realize how desperate Kenny and Mike really were. They needed him, not as a partner, but as their last hope. After drawing out the moment with deliberate thought, Danny leaned forward, his voice calm but cutting. "I'll help you reclaim the mine," he said, "but I want a bigger share of the treasure. Much bigger than you had planned." The demand hit them like a punch. Kenny and Mike exchanged stunned looks. Their expectations had already been modest, and Danny was asking for far more. But reality pressed down on them. Without him, there would be no deal at all. Swallowing their pride, they agreed. Yet Danny, with his cruel sense of theater, wasn't finished. He decided to set a test. For his own amusement, he revealed the final condition. "I'll go through with the deal," he said with a grin, "if one of you enters the tiger's cage and walks out alive." The words drained the color from their faces. The tiger was no rumor. Danny truly owned the beast, a towering predator whose roars shook the walls. Mike's hands trembled. Kenny, still recovering from illness but driven by sheer necessity, stepped forward. He knew the treasure had to be his, no matter the cost. With painstaking caution, Kenny slipped into the cage. Every step felt like his last. The tiger's eyes glowed with suspicion, its body coiled, ready to strike at the faintest misstep. Kenny's mind raced. He had to control his body language. Panic would mean death. Summoning all the courage he could muster, he steadied his breath, extended his hand, and placed it gently on the animal's massive head. The tiger blinked, huffed, but did not attack. For a tense moment, the world stood still. Then, as though satisfied, the beast lowered its gaze. Kenny slowly backed away and stepped out of the cage, alive. He had passed the test. Danny, impressed by his nerve, kept his word. He pulled strings with the government, clearing the way for Kenny and Mike to resume their search at the treasure site. Overjoyed, the two men threw themselves into the work once more. Their hopes reignited. Every report suggested the golden fortune was close, hidden within reach. Kenny's reputation rebounded almost overnight. Wealth flowed back into his life, investors lined up at his door, and his company began to thrive again. But as success returned, his personal life crumbled. Eager to share his triumph, Kenny went to see his wife, Kate. Instead, at the store where she worked, he overheard her speaking in hushed, intimate tones with another man. Rage twisted inside him when he realized she was having an affair, revenge for his own betrayals. Without a word, he turned and stormed out, the image burning in his mind. The following day, riding high on his company's soaring profits, Kenny hosted a lavish party. It was meant to showcase his triumph, his return to greatness. Standing before the crowd, he delivered a speech alone, his voice ringing with pride. He claimed every ounce of credit for their success. Mike was there, but only for a short while. He listened in silence, then slipped away quietly as the applause faded, leaving Kenny basking in the spotlight alone. Mike had been there at the party, standing in the back with a drink in hand, listening quietly as Kenny boasted about their success. But the moment the applause ended and the spotlight dimmed, Mike slipped away without a word. No explanation, no farewell. From that night onward, he vanished from Kenny's life forever. The following morning, Kenny returned to his office expecting to find the usual bustle of business. Instead, he found a crowd gathered outside the building, angry investors and employees who had once praised him. Their faces were twisted with rage, their shouts cutting through the air like knives. Before Kenny could make sense of it, they dragged him from his car, fists and kicks raining down on him. Dazed and bloodied, he stumbled into the building, demanding answers. Inside, the truth struck harder than any blow. His staff and the FBI laid it bare. The gold that Kenny's company had been pulling from the mountain wasn't from a hidden treasure trove at all. It was the same type of gold that naturally existed in the sea, repackaged into a lie to lure investors. The grand story of a lost mine had been nothing more than a carefully spun deception. Investors, dazzled by early profits, had poured in millions without questioning the narrative. But now the facade had collapsed, and Kenny realized he hadn't just been outmaneuvered, he had been used. The most shocking revelation came last. More than half of the company's shares had been sold off by someone else, silently stripping him of control. His empire, built on shaky ground, was gone in an instant. Forced to shut the company down, Kenny stood before the press, his voice hollow. He confessed that he knew nothing about the scheme, nothing about the missing shares, nothing about how it all unraveled. His words sounded less like a defense and more like the broken ramblings of a ruined man. Bankruptcy swallowed him whole. With no assets left, no wealth, and no allies, Kenny faced investigations from multiple agencies. Cornered, he whispered the only name that made sense, Mike. He was sure his old partner was behind it. But the agents dismissed the idea. According to government records, Mike was already dead. Arrested by Indonesian authorities months earlier, he had allegedly committed suicide by leaping from a helicopter mid-flight. The official reports left no room for doubt, but Kenny refused to believe them. In his heart, he was certain Mike had staged his death, slipping into the shadows to escape the reach of governments and investors alike. The agents had no evidence to hold him, so Kenny was released. Shaken and exhausted, he went home, where Kate was waiting. She greeted him not with sympathy but with a knowing smile, as if she had seen the storm long before it arrived. Without a word, she handed him a stack of letters that had been delivered in his name. Kenny tore them open, and froze. Every letter was written by Mike. Inside one envelope lay a check worth millions. Another contained a signed document, proof of their old pact. Any discoveries from their exploration would be divided by percentage. Mike had honored the agreement. Somewhere deep in the forest, he had found the real treasure. He had taken his share and left the rest for Kenny. The realization hit hard. Mike hadn't betrayed him entirely, he had simply chosen a different life. A quieter one, hidden away from the chaos, where wealth was no longer flaunted but used to live in peace. Kenny, left with scraps of fortune but a second chance at survival, could do the same. Though he had lost everything he once built, a path forward remained. A simpler, more honest life awaited him. And with that, the curtain fell on Kenny's turbulent journey. That is where our story ends.